I'd like to introduce Professor Shawn Zelig Aster from our Department of Land of Israel Studies and Archaeology, who will be speaking with us today specifically regarding that program. Professor Shawn Zelig Aster is an associate professor in the Martin Szusz Land of Israel Studies and Archaeology Department, also what we call LISA, and teaches the history and geography of the biblical period. He also teaches prophetic literature in the Bible department. Professor Zelig Aster has published a book on the historical background of Isaiah 139, as well as many articles. His YouTube lectures are available on the Land of Israel Studies and Archaeology Department's website. Today, Professor Zelig Aster will give an overview of the LISA department, as well as a short talk on one of his specialties, which I will leave for him to introduce. Professor Zelig Aster, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to point out that both I and Professor Eschels teach in both the Land of Israel Studies program and the Bible department, so that we're both working in both departments, and we're giving students the opportunity to interact with the advantages and strengths of each of the departments. The Land of Israel Studies Department was created for people who are interested in interdisciplinary research, in studying the land of Israel from all periods, from prehistory to the modern times, for people who want an experiential program in which they're not only in the classroom, but also studying the land by interacting directly with the land. That means in archaeological excavations, of which our department is currently running 4 different archaeological excavations in which students participate, as well as several survey projects. We run weekly and more extensive field trips in which students explore and see various important historical, geological, and archaeological sites throughout the country. That's an integral part of the program, is that you participate in field trips. And so we're a program that cannot run on the basis of Zoom. At the same time, we also have a very extensive faculty. Some of the faculty members are listed, and there are many more. This is just a random selection of several faculty members. There's a very unique social and open learning environment in the department. Our students appreciate the opportunity that we don't only come to the classroom together, we also work in the labs together. We also work on digs together. We also explore on field trips together. We have a core program of history, which all students need to study the different historical periods, but we also have a wide variety of elective courses in archaeology, in which students can specialize in ancient periods, students can specialize in modern periods, students can specialize in the biblical periods, or in any other period you like. We have courses, you have a wide range of courses, which you can see here, and you can also see pictures our students have taken on our field trips. Here is an example of students on excavations. Excavation doesn't mean just shoveling out wheelbarrowfuls of earth out of squares. It also means working with computers, recording finds, analyzing finds, and so on and so forth. So there's a wide variety of experiences students have, and here you have images from Aaron Mayer's archaeological laboratory, where he has a variety of very valuable and fascinating equipment, which he describes here and which you can see on his video. And I'll now give you an example of how I work and why I work. I work on prophetic literature, and I hope this short presentation of about 5 minutes will be interesting both to those of you who are coming to learn about Bar Ilan and to those of us who are faculty. It's a short sampling of my research, and it sort of shows the join between the Bible department and the Land of Israel Studies department. What I do is take biblical prophecy, which is of course a literary creation, and place it into its historical context. In other words, I just sort of bridge the Land of Israel Studies program and the Bible department, just as Professor Eschel does in a different way. I'd like to take this evening with you a short passage that relates to Cyrus' declaration and explore how Cyrus' declaration can be seen in a larger historical context. Cyrus' declaration is a very, very important passage with which the book of Ezra opens. It is essentially a declaration of the king of Persia, who declares in 538 BCE the Judahite exiles who are exiled in the Babylonian exile can now return to the land of Israel. This marks the end of the Babylonian exile in a certain way, and the beginning of the return to Zion, the first return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel in 538 BCE. And what I'd like to do now is, we have the biblical text. We know the historical context from historical writings of the Greek writers. We also have Cyrus' own writings, which Assyriologists, those scholars who study the ancient languages of Mesopotamia, have explored. Cyrus Cylinder is written in ancient Babylonian or Akkadian, and we'll look at Cyrus Cylinder and how Cyrus Cylinder relates to the historical reality behind the biblical passages. We can also explore this through the demographic realities and look at the archaeology of the Persian period. Where do the Israelites return to? What type of demographic pattern do we have around the land of Israel in the Persian period? And that's also an interesting question, which I'm not going to touch on in the next 4 or 5 minutes.
Professor Shawn, just if you can pass the slide.
Yeah. Here, are you seeing me?
Yes, but we are seeing only the first slide.
Didn't move.
It didn't move. That's very strange. Sorry about that problem. I'm not sure.
There's something on the top that says "Afoch halicha lezmina." I think you need to press that button.
Let me try this. Does this show you? Does this work now?
Yes.
Okay, here we are.
That's fine. Great.
Okay, so here you have Cyrus' declaration. It's this famous passage with which the book of Ezra opens. And now we're going to look at, not at Cyrus' declaration, which we know from the Bible, but at Cyrus' cylinder. This is a picture of Cyrus' cylinder. It's an Akkadian text now in the British Museum, and we're going to, and various copies in other museums, and we'll look now at the Cyrus cylinder and show how that gives a little bit of historical background to what we find in the Bible. Now, the Cyrus cylinder is dealing with a very important historical question. Cyrus, who lives in 539 BCE, is not a Babylonian. He is a Persian, not even a Persian. He's a member from the kingdom of Anshan, and he comes to Babylon and takes over Babylon. And the Babylonians have to ask, well, why is this person taking over Babylon? Babylon is a very ancient and beautiful and important country. Why is Cyrus taking over Babylon? And Cyrus issues this cylinder that you see here, which we'll read a few lines of in a second, to explain to the Babylonians why he's taking over Babylon. His claim is that the god of Babylon, Marduk, chose him, Cyrus, even though Cyrus is not from Babylon, and wants Cyrus to rule Babylon. Now, at the same time, the same Cyrus is making a declaration that allows the Judahites to return to the land of Israel. So is Cyrus good for the Jews, or is Cyrus bad for the Jews? This is, of course, not a coffee table discussion, but one that Isaiah in chapters 40 to 48 has to engage. Why is Cyrus, who's an idol worshiper, the legitimate harbinger of the redemption of Judah? That's the major question that Isaiah is dealing with. And that question is dealt with against the background of Cyrus making this declaration, which we know from Ezra, and this cylinder, which we know from the Akkadian text you see here. What does Cyrus say in his declaration? And here you have a few lines from that declaration that I translated for you from Akkadian. And it talks about how Marduk, the god of Babylon, the he here is Marduk, the god of Babylon, who searched over the whole world and supported the hand of Cyrus, the king of Anshan, called his call and brings him to Babylon. This is the legitimation that Cyrus is proclaiming. This is what he's saying on the cylinder. I'm legitimate because the god of Babylon called me. Again, the Jews in Babylon are hearing this. They have to think about the question, is this guy Cyrus helpful, or is he an idolater who opposes us? Do we want to support him? When he says all these things about how Marduk supports him, how does that interface with his declaration that Judahites should return to Jerusalem? And here we have three verses from the book of Isaiah, where the book of Isaiah in chapter 41 begins to explore how to deal with Cyrus. In other words, it's prophecy in a historical background. And Isaiah asks about Cyrus the following questions. He asks, who awake? And I'm encourage you, of course, to follow in Hebrew. If you can't do that now, you should be able to by the time you finish our MA program. And he asks the people of Babylon and the Jews of Babylon the following questions. Who awakened someone from the east and called victory to his feet? He gave before him nations, and over kings he will rule. He makes his sword like dust, his bow like the flying chaff. And in other words, Isaiah is asking, who awakened someone from the east and made him powerful? And then in verse 3 talks about how this one who was awakened from the east passes over a road that didn't yet come to his feet, a new road. And who accomplished and did this? And Isaiah answers that it's God who does this, who accomplished, that announces the generations from the first. Now, if you look carefully at these verses, you'll notice three interesting similarities between Cyrus Cylinder and what Isaiah declares. First of all, both speak about a vast army and arms whose numbers can't be counted. They speak about a peaceful submission of enemies. And they speak about someone coming to a city which they haven't yet entered. And so what Isaiah is doing, he's taking the cylinder of Cyrus. Isaiah knows the cylinder of Cyrus. He knows what Cyrus is saying. And he's saying, all that propaganda that you, Cyrus, are speaking about how you accomplished all these things with the help of Marduk, it's true you accomplished all these things, but it's not Marduk who's choosing you. It's God who's choosing you. In other words, Isaiah is here purposely subverting Cyrus Cylinder and Cyrus ideology. What I'm trying to show here is that biblical prophecy operates in a historical background. And if you look at the historical background, if you read the historical texts, if you look at the archaeology and look at the history and the texts of history, you can get a much more deep understanding of what's going on in biblical prophecy. So if you're interested in the interactions of Bible and historical context, I encourage you to come and explore our departments, both biblical studies and Land of Israel studies. If you're interested in more modern periods of Land of Israel, you can explore how Cyrus Cylinder resonates with the modern period and how that declaration, how the process of return impacts on Second Temple Judaism. So there's a lot of interesting questions which you can explore here. And I'm going to leave you with those thoughts. Like in Land of Israel Studies, we offer a thesis track and a non-thesis track in LISA. You can continue, those if you are go into the thesis track and earn an appropriate grade, you can continue on to the PhD. We have a variety of faculty who can advise you. Theses can be written in Hebrew or English. Here are some of our requirements. And we encourage, and there's a wide variety of courses and programs, and you can explore how the program can most fit your interests. So I encourage you to think about coming to us and think about working with our programs. Thanks so much. Okay, and our application deadline is July 31st, so please apply soon. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it back now to Szusz.